What you need to do is get to a point where you say to yourself, I've done this before, I know I can keep going. But you don't know that unless you ever push yourself to find out. So whatever you're doing at the moment, I encourage you to say, how much more can you work? How much better can you make the project that you're working on at the moment? How many more sacrifices can you make to get the most out of what you're working on at the moment? Because at some point in time in the future, what you're working on now is going to be the thing that you are judged upon. Hello and welcome to the SportsGrad Podcast, the ultimate guide to make it in the sports industry, brought to you by Deakin University, home to the world's #1 sports science school. My name is Reuben Williams. I'm an ex-Cricket Australia employee who started SportsGrad to help others get their own dream job, and now it's become my dream job. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, the purpose of this is to help you land a job in sport. So if that's for you, hit subscribe and I will be in your ears every single week with advice on how to start living the dream in sport. Now, today I'm talking about a topic known as level 12 intensity. And you might be thinking, what is level 12 intensity? Level 12 intensity is basically when you do whatever it takes and disregard everything else until you've done what is required to win. And the reason why I want to talk about that is because to survive in the sports industry, you have to be the kind of person who is prepared to go to level 12 intensity. So what does that actually look like? Well, first, let's have a think about like the old way of doing things. So I was having a conversation recently with a person who was looking to break into the sports industry in their late 20s, getting to that stage of life where, things are getting pretty serious with everything going on in their world. And they're talking to me about a job in sport, and the main questions were about, how much does it pay? And, when can I go home? And, it's important that I go, have the time to play with my dog and hang out with my wife and all those other different things, which all of them are lovely. But none of the questions were around, actually why I wanted to do the job and your willingness to make an impact in the job. Like that was less important than, say, the balance of lifestyle around what they were getting into. And I was worried for this person because I'm not sure that they had what it takes to get into sport, because sport is a level 12 industry. And I want to share an example with you of what level 12 looks like. It's not from the sports industry, it's from the tech industry. And it involves Mark Zuckerberg buying Facebook. And you might be thinking, okay, well, I'm never going to be Mark Zuckerberg. There's only one Mark Zuckerberg in the world. But let me give you an example of what this actually looks like, because there are many different ways you can emulate level 12 intensity into your career and your job hunting as well. So back in the day when Instagram was taking off, Mark Zuckerberg identified that, Instagram could be a threat for Facebook. And he thought, well, we can either duplicate it or we can buy it out. And at the time, Instagram was thinking about selling as well. And there were multiple different private equity firms and people who were looking at buying Instagram for roughly, $500 million. And a lot of these deals were getting close to being finalized. But for Zuck, he was like, this could be the thing that ends Facebook, or it could be the thing that takes us to the moon. And so he had a quick conversation with another person at Facebook. And then it came up to Easter. And everyone was like, you know what, let's just take the holiday off and we'll come back to these deals later on. Zuck didn't stop there. He said to the guy who was running Instagram at the time, and he said, you know what, why don't you come up to my house on Good Friday, we'll chat it out and see if we can do something here. And the guy from Instagram's like, oh, no, maybe not, just leave it. And Zuck's like, no, you got to come over. And so they chat it out, talk about where the business is going, and then Zuck throws down $1 billion deal. And he says, I'll offer you twice as much as what anyone else is prepared to pay. And so the guy thought about it quickly, said yes. Zuck then rounds up all of his lawyers, Instagram round up all of their lawyers, and they did a deal that was signed off before the end of the weekend. So by the time everyone was going back to work on Tuesday after Easter Monday, the deal was already done. Nobody had the chance to buy Instagram anymore. The only reason because of that is because Zuck was prepared to move quicker than anybody else. He didn't care if it was Easter. He didn't care if people were on holiday. He dragged his people out of this and made this thing happen when it mattered most. And so you might be thinking, well, I don't have $1 billion of money to throw at all these different things. That's okay. There are people out there who do have that sort of money, but they weren't prepared to move as quickly as Mark Zuckerberg to get this thing done. Quick one. Have you got your eye on a future in sport? If you're ready to transform the industry, then perhaps get ready to study with Deakin and prepare yourself to redefine what it means to work in sport. That's what I did, at least. Deakin's School of Exercise and Nutrition Sciences is ranked #1 in the world. Pretty cool, hey? So if you want to turn your passion for sport into an impactful career, get ready to push the limits of exercise science, sport coaching, sport development, sport management, nutrition sciences, physical education, and more. You can do it all at Deakin. Apply now and study at Deakin University. Whatever your situation is, have a think about how you can use level 12 intensity to win at whatever game you're playing. Because when I talk to people in the sports industry, or when people in the sports industry talk to me and they say, hey, Reuben, we really we want someone who, we can train up, and just someone who gets it. Like, people in the sports industry always talk to me as just someone who gets it. And I come across a lot of people who either get it or they don't get it. So what is getting it in the sports industry? Getting it is understanding that, the sports industry is different. It's not a 9-to-5 industry. It's a weekend industry. It's a late night industry. It's a do whatever it takes industry. And so when people come to me and say like, hey, we want to recruit someone, but we just want to recruit someone like who gets it. That is what they're talking about. They want level 12 operators who are prepared to go above and beyond to do what it takes to put the sports industry together. So how do you get to level 12 intensity? You might be thinking, well, I don't know if I can do that. That sounds hard. It is hard. The first thing you have to do is you have to prove to yourself that you can be a level 12 operator. Nobody becomes a level 12 operator by just hoping. First, you've got to create evidence for yourself. So I'm going to share with you a few different examples that kind of have helped me create evidence for myself over the time to get to a point where I feel like, nothing is really that unachievable. So for example, going way back, I remember when I was in university, I used to cram for exams and leave it to the last minute. And there was one particular essay that, I hadn't started 30 hours before the deadline. It was a 3,000 word essay. And so I went to the library that night and basically pulled an all-nighter into the next day and wrote 3,000 words, sent it off with 30 hours to go, or within the 30 hours, and got a pretty good score for it. And you might be thinking, oh, Reuben, that's just poor time management. Well, yes, it is. But at first, that created evidence for myself that I was like, cool, if I need to, I know I can smash out a large project in the final remaining time that I've got. Was it uncomfortable? Yes, but at least I know I can do that should I ever be in that situation again. Fast forward to when COVID was happening, and I moved into a share house with my friend Matt. Now, Matt was like an elite level hockey player, exceptionally good runner. And if you followed him on Strava, he was just like a metronome. He was running at 4-minute kilometers every single run. And at the time, I would fluctuate. I was going between, 4 minutes 30 on a good day, or 5 minutes, or 5 minutes 30 if I couldn't be bothered. And so my motivation would determine how quickly I ran. But when I started living with Matt, I learned how to push myself. And so when I was running with Matt, we would do this, 8-kilometer loop around Hawthorn. And my only goal was just stick with Matt. And we used to get to this final sprint. It was about 200 meters long, gradual uphill. And all I wanted to do was beat Matt. And that was when I learned how far that I could push myself. Because I would literally be running along and in my head, I'd be saying you're not dead, keep going. And I just keep repeating that. You're not dead, keep going. Not dead, keep going. And it would sometimes it would get pretty intense to the point where I'd start getting black splodges in my vision. I was like, what is going on here? And I'd be absolutely gassed by the end of it. But I reckon I only lost maybe 2 or 3 sprints out of, the many, many runs that Matt and I had, just because I learnt what my limit is and just got better at pushing it and pushing it and pushing it. And so that was just in a running sense. And so again, that's kind of carried over to the half marathons and marathons I've done, where I'm like, okay, I know this sucks, but I've created evidence for myself that I can stay at this threshold and just keep pushing myself. So don't stop, keep going. A more extreme example that I hope doesn't relate to very many other people at all, but even when I went through the whole sexual assault ordeal, the first time I went into court to give my evidence in front of my perpetrator, I was incredibly nervous. I was like, what is the court going to be like? What is seeing him going to be like? What is the defense lawyer going to be like? I was extremely nervous, to put it lightly. But then when the retrial happened, I had to go back there again. I was like, no, this is fine. I've done it once. I can do it again. I know the perpetrator looks pathetic. I know the defense lawyer is just going to ask stupid questions. Court's not that scary. I know my story. you've created evidence for yourself that you can step into this environment and deliver it. So just go and do it again. What you need to do is get to a point where you say to yourself, I've done this before. I know I can keep going. But you don't know that unless you ever push yourself to find out. So whatever you're doing at the moment, I encourage you to say, how much more can you work? How much better can you make the project that you're working on at the moment? How many more sacrifices can you make to get the most out of what you're working on at the moment? Because at some point in time in the future, what you're working on now is going to be the thing that you are judged upon. And this exists in every single role. So let's say, for example, like when you get into the sports industry, you are going to get thrown into situations where you are going to be required to go to level 12. And if you've never been to level 12 before, then it's going to be a daunting thing. I remember Kerry Gassner from, I think, episode 206 back in the day. You know, he was he used to be a homicide detective. Worked in the police force for a long, long time, has seen a lot of shit, to put it lightly. So when he does his role as venue manager of John Cain Arena and something goes wrong inside the venue or an event is happening, like, he is the coolest, calmest head out there, because in his mind, this is not that bad to what he's seen. And so you don't get to that point where you're a cool, calm, collected operator like Kerry and can handle the stresses of the sports industry unless you push yourself to find out, unless you put yourself in those situations. And if you're thinking like, oh no, I'm not really prepared to do that to get in, well, you're gonna find out if you're willing to survive or not once you get in, because I see a lot of people who do the work, or maybe they get lucky, they break into sport, and then they get into the role and they're like, oh, actually this is hard. There are weekends. I got to work late nights. Things come up at the last minute. I'm not really sure if this is for me. And if that's not for you, that's totally fine. But if you want to work in sport, this is what you got to prepare yourself for. And it exists, level 12 exists in every single role. So let's say, for example, like, you want to work in partnerships, and, you are managing partnerships for the Australian Open, and the day before the Australian Open final, Kia sends you a message and they say like, hey, we need to change the 30 tickets that we've got allocated to our seats, because, someone can't come anymore and someone else wants to bring a new friend, and, whatever's happened. And the email comes through at like, 10 p.m. at night, and you've just got to make the tickets happen so that the partner can get there. Same with marketing. Marketing teams have creative deadlines. The Australian cricket summer is going to start on a particular day. And when the first ball of the first test match is bowled, you want to make sure that you have got your ads on the TV or your ads on the signage around the stadium. And if it's not there, then you do not get seen. You miss that moment. And so if you come up with an idea that you want to bring it to life, and you have to film the ad, and you have to talk to the right channels, and you have to bring all those different people on the journey and make sure everything's ticked off and crossed off so it fits in with the venue, fits in with all the different specs, whatever. Like, that's a lot of time just to get an ad up, but it has a deadline. And so for marketing teams, sometimes you are working late nights in the lead up until a sporting match, because the match is going to happen whether you like it or not. You better make sure that your creative is on display. Journalism. Tom Morris, who I am in contact with, he would tell me he's constantly on his phone, because I remember listening to a podcast clip where he said there was one particular day where he wasn't on his phone and he missed a message that meant that he couldn't break a story, and someone else broke the story instead. And so for Tom, he was like, shit, I should have been ready to go at that particular moment, and he missed that opportunity. And so for Tom, like, his level 12 is just always being on. And so if you want to step into the journalism space, that's kind of what it takes to get to that level of a Tom Morris who's breaking stories just about every single day. And if a story breaks overnight, you are up out of bed making sure that you are covering absolutely everything. On that topic as well, I remember vividly when the sandpaper incident went down at Cricket Australia. And I was talking to the communications team. They basically worked all through the night into the next day to handle the situation, because every single newspaper, every single publication in the world who likes cricket wanted to get in touch with Cricket Australia, and they were just trying to keep the Wolves at bay. In saying that as well, the integrity team, communications team, CEO, they were on the first plane over to South Africa to fix this situation. So, if you're in a comms role and you're trying to handle the story and the messaging that's going out around events that are happening at your team or your league, that doesn't sleep. You've got to get to, say, the journalist like Tom Morris and control the story before someone else, controls it for you. So communications, you are constantly on at any moment should an event like that comes up. And in sport, it tends to happen a fair bit. Events and operations, same sort of thing. There was a viral clip that came out of Sail GP in Sydney a couple of years ago where basically like a thunderstorm swept through Sydney. And at that point in time, they were trying to get the boats out onto the water of Sydney Harbour. And to do that, they get this massive crane, hook it up to the top of the mast and connect it with the bottom catamaran area. And so, this wing sail is like hanging off a crane at this point in time, and a massive gust sweeps through Sydney Harbour and starts blowing this wind around. And it was like Armageddon. Like it was smashing into tents, bits of the wing are flying off, like stuff is breaking and getting destroyed everywhere. It was literally like something out of a movie. I'd encourage you to look it up. But when that happens, the people working in the Sail GP and the event and operations team, they don't have a choice but to clean up that situation until it's cleaned up. And that might take literally all night, but you've just got to get the job done. And I remember talking to Geordie Miles. He's the CEO of Spark Event Group. He used to be a just an event freelancer who would go around working every single event, and he was working on White Night, years and years ago, and again, there was just always something to be done, always something to be fixed up. He's working straight through the night, and he'd basically had worked overtime in one particular shift to the point where there was only an hour's gap before he had to start his next shift. So he just pushed through, and he ended up working like a 36-hour shift or something ridiculous like that. And whilst I'm encouraging you to go to level 12 and think about how you can push it, I wouldn't encourage anybody to push themselves to a 36-hour shift to the point where they literally can't stand up. And Geordie will tell you in that interview that the way that he views the event industry now is based on some of his own experiences of going too far. So there is a limit with this sort of stuff. But, even half of that is like an 18-hour shift just to get the job done. And that is pretty common in events. I was chatting with Clayton Henderson, who is an account manager at IMG. He's coming down my neck of the woods to set up the Great Ocean Road running festival soon. And I said, let me know when you get down here. And he's like, mate, I'm not going to have a single moment to scratch myself. On the days, he's he's up at 3 a.m. setting up the race, not clocking off until the job's done. That is just the nature of working in events. Then you got player agents. So, player agents, you're usually the first person on call when a player gets into trouble. So if you look at any of your favorite players in the AFL or the NRL or, football around the world, whatever it might be, if your player gets into a fight on the weekend, your player is probably calling you as their agent first to help them get out of it. And so you've just got to kind of deal with that. I remember someone saying to me, to really put the title of this kind of job simply and not doing justice to what a player agent actually does, but they said to me being a player agent is sometimes a combination of babysitting and being a salesperson. And sometimes you've got to do that element of caring for your player at any time of the week. It doesn't matter what's happening because, players tend to get into this sort of trouble. So you're constantly on call. And then finally, if you want to be an exec CEO, you're basically on call for everything because everything that goes on in all those different departments, it feeds up to you. And you've got to be the one supporting that and driving that too. So if you want to get to that level as well, you are in level 12 all day, every single day. If you look at what's going on in the AFL at the moment with all the different rule changes or all the different, things that are going on between players and clubs, Laura Kane at the moment is the person who's kind of on the receiving end of all of this. And I was kind of thinking about what her day must look like at the moment. But I can't imagine, she's, finishing at 5 o'clock each day when, there are so many different issues to tackle at the moment. So it's going to exist at every single level in sport. But to get there, you still have to go through that as well, because by going through the process, you're going to survive much better when you do arrive at this point in time. So when you're a job hunter as well, you need to find that level 12 intensity. And I remember when I was in my final year of university and I was president of the Deakin University Sports Society. I was doing an internship with Australian University Sport. I was trying to start SportsGrad as a side hustle YouTube channel. I was volunteering at my cricket club, volunteering at my footy club. I had picked up another role with Paran Junior Football Club. I was trying to do 4 subjects a semester at the time. I was trying to play footy and play cricket when the pre-seasons would cross over. That would be 4 nights a week for me. And then on top of that, I had a relationship and I had, friends that I wanted to see and family I wanted to, stay in touch with as well. And so it was just like a lot. And I remember there was one particular day where I had flown back to Melbourne from the Gold Coast because I'd been up there for the Unisport Australia conference, and I flew straight back into Melbourne, smashed out an assignment, and then went and hosted a speed networking event for the Deakin University Sports Society. And I remember getting home at like midnight that night, and I just collapsed sideways on my bed, and I was like, when is this going to end? Later that year, similar sort of story. I got into the car to go to cricket training one night. My friend Cam, who was picking me up, I was so excited to tell him about my latest internship with the Hawthorn Football Club. And he knew everything else I was doing at the time. He said, Reuben, when is one of these people actually going to pay you? And I said to him, Cam, I don't know, but at some point, somebody will. A few months later, that became Cricket Australia. I was able to wipe everything clean and step into my dream job because I'd been prepared to go to level 12 intensity to get the necessary experience. And so, like, I talk to a lot of people who are just not sure what they're capable of yet. And you can immediately spot someone who is nervous about their career, uncertain about what the future holds, uncertain about where they're going. And so their first sort of, comments and questions when they talk to me about like, how can I find more work-life balance, or how can I make sure I don't burn out? They're basically just concerned that, they want to look after themselves. And that's totally, totally fine. But the sports industry is a level 12 industry. If you are not prepared to get to that point, it's going to be very hard to survive once you get in there. And if you go back to episode 286, where I talk with Jacob Gaynor, who is the head of content at the GWS Giants, he says in that episode that working in sport is a lifestyle and that it is not for everyone. And so if that is not for you, that's totally fine. But if you want to be a part of these amazing moments where, you are on the field capturing incredible content, you're helping your favorite athletes, you're putting together the biggest events in the world, then if you want that reward, you've got to be prepared to put in the effort. And so I would encourage you to think about, what can I do in my life and in my career at the moment that is going to help me get to that level 12? Because it's not only going to help you get in, but it's also going to help you stay in. Hope I haven't scared you too much, but that is the reality of wanting to work in sport. We also run a program that makes it a hell of a lot easier to get to level 12 and, create systems and frameworks so you know exactly what you need to do. If you do want a hand with that, it's called the SportsGrad Method Accelerator Program, and you can apply for the next cohort in the comments, or just head to sportsgrad.com.au/accelerator. Catch you next week. Hey, last thing before you go. Everyone knows the sports industry is super competitive, so you might want to keep this to yourself. But every Monday, I send out an email called Shortcuts by SportsGrad. It takes 5 minutes to read, and it gives you everything you need to get an edge over other job hunters on a silver platter. Here you'll find exclusive job opportunities, networking events, and premium resources to get ahead. Again, it takes less than 5 minutes to read, and it's designed to help you get ahead and stay ahead. So if you want to receive the next one in your inbox, head to sportsgrad.com.au/newsletter. But as I mentioned, competition for jobs in sport is red hot, so perhaps keep this to yourself.